Hello there. I am so glad that you're joining me tonight because y'all have had a chance to listen to this guest before. But it was the first time I had ever tried to record my own show. It was dramatic. It was terrible. Um, there we are. We were doing it in the conference room at Ozark, and it was it was great information, but a lousy show visually. So we're trying again. And I may be having a little bit of audio problem. It will never take away from my guest. Brent Raines is a really cool author. He is somebody who is he's a paranormal investigator. He's a ufologist person. He is like me. He's interested in everything anomalous. He is he really chronicled John Mack. He is somebody that knows a lot more than I do about a lot of topics I'm interested in. So that's always one of my favorite people to talk to. And this is Brent Raines. So, hey, Brent.
Hey, Catherine, how you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Well, that
I'm
was
so
awful.
glad that you're here.
Well, I'm
And,
glad to be here,
you
and
know,
thank
I
you for
had
all
so
those
much fun
nice
with
things.
you.
Um, thanks for all those nice things you said. The check will be in the mail starting tomorrow. Anyway,
Well,
um,
I am going to turn this up a little bit because
okay.
for anyone listening that hasn't determined yet, I am having some audio trouble and I may get a little bit of feedback. I'm trying very hard not to, but I have to turn Brent up so that we can actually have a conversation. So I'm just glad you're here because you know what? I have found that when we talk about sometimes really anomalous topics, equipment goes awry. And it doesn't happen very often, thank goodness. But before I could totally blame it on weirdness that was just my inexperience with that. But now I've got a little bit more practice. So, but I am I'm really interested because we did talk about it some, but we didn't get into a lot of the information about why you're interested in these topics because they're really diverse and they're not mainstream. When I first started doing this, it was weird to everybody who knew me, and you've been doing this a lot longer than I have.
Well, I just when I started, as a teenager, age 14, I just read Flying Saucer Serious Business by Frank Edwards, who was a noted writer, radio personality, and he wrote Flying Saucer Serious Business. And that book was really, we just come off of the 1966 wave of sightings, um, and there was a lot of activity in the media at that time. And then with his book, uh, you know, police officers and airline pilots and people, even an astronomer, observing these things. And I had an interest before that, but at that point, it compelled me by January of '67 to get involved myself, to start reading more literature and uh, clipping things out of the newspaper that I could find. I'd even, go to a library or in Augusta, Maine, the Kennebec Daily Kennebec Journal there at the Capitol. And a friend and I, another teenage buddy, we would go to this room where they had a microfiche and got to talking to the reporters. And one of them eventually wrote up 2 articles in the newspaper about what we were doing. But we check out go back to 1947 when it all began, and there was a lot of things in the paper, and other periods of time like 1909, 1910, the airship wave, and so on. So that's how I got how I got started. I was just really really intrigued. I didn't know how long it would last, but it's next January. It will be 60 years. You know,
A little while.
and just ongoing. And I know my friend Greg Little talks about his deep interest in Native American Indian mounds. He's now just come out with a 900-page uh, third edition, which keeps getting bigger with each one. It's available on Amazon, of course, and Native American Indian Mounds Earthworks. We've been on a number of uh, um, visits to different sites with him and his wife Laura. And he says when he started out, all he knew about Indian mounds, you know, he could have put on the back of a postage stamp. So I think that's a little exaggerated, but I could use that, I guess, because I really didn't know what I was doing, what it was about. And then it was later on, it was just coming to read, you know, some of the other researchers who blended a lot of this material together. They went beyond the usual, you know, mainstream nuts and bolts ET theory and started looking at all the different psychic elements. And of course, Jacques Vallée, the French scientist, who's written quite a number of books and been heavily involved, and Keel and Vallée, both boots on the ground people. And I even, you know, was kind of impressed with some of Brad Steiger's investigative work, and even corresponded with him. And he wrote some articles for my magazine, and wrote an introduction to my first book, Visitors from Hidden Realms, back in 2004. And so I've got a little whistle here. I got a new upper plate here.
Well, I'll tell you, there's much better than not having it. So,
yeah. But anyway, that's how I kind of got started early on. And, you know, it's just been something that I've kind of wondered sometimes, how is it that I got into this and have spent all this time and still, you know, I know just a few years before Keel's passing, he wrote me and said that, you know, that he, you know, I guess felt kind of disappointed because he really, he had a theory, but he said that I can't prove it. It's kind of up in the air. And, you know, he says it's the answer, if we ever get it, will be way, way off in the distance still. So anyway, but yeah, I, you know, got intrigued with and followed really their example of getting out in the field myself. I wanted to, in fact, I consulted with Keel, you know, how I should approach it and so on. And I saved up money, and I really, in the summer of 1975, I spent just about the whole summer on the road from Maine to Florida and out to Indiana and places. And a family in Fairfield, Ohio, just outside of Cincinnati, Charles and Jerry Wilhelm, had created a UFO group called the Ohio UFO Investigators League. And they had they even had started putting out a magazine. And so I flew out there, I think in June, spent several days, and they, you know, because they'd seen UFOs, and that was what brought them into the, you know, the subject. In fact, the wife had claimed that she had gotten up early one morning. Her little girl, she had named Becky, was need to warm up the bottle at the kitchen sink, and looked out the window, and there was this huge disc hovering just over the power lines outside the room there. And she said she was real excited. She went upstairs and tried to wake up her husband Charlie, and he wouldn't wake up. You know, you hear that in a number of stories. You know, maybe it's just you know, sometimes you get to think maybe it was just for them to experience. And then she did claim later on she actually had several experiences where she saw a tall, silver-suited humanoid, I think Nordic type being in the house, would appear and smile at her and then just vanish. So, you know, what to make of that? But they had some psychic things. She claimed she was in the laundry room, I think, and a Clorox bottle floated off the shelf and then just dropped to the floor. But she said it didn't just fall off; it sort of floated out and then dropped. So, anyway,
wow, that's intense.
And I was actually brought in touch with them and a number of other people at that time through Dr. Berthold Schwartz, who was a psychiatrist, parapsychologist who had written an article in the Jersey Medical Journal about 4 people that he had interviewed who had these spectacular UFO sightings, and one even claimed to have poltergeist experience. And John Keel got wind of it, and so he befriended the good doctor. And I got to know the good doctor through an experiencer in Florida whose husband was in the Navy and was in my I was in the Navy for 2 years, and in '73 my destroyer escort that I was on became home ported there at Mayport, Florida, where she lived on base with her 2 sons and her husband. I never did meet her husband. Her husband was always deployed. But I got to see her, and that was during '73. There was all those sightings, and she even had a contact out in New Orleans when the Hickson Parker case broke. I flew out there from Jacksonville one weekend and went and met them both by going to New Orleans and meeting up with her contact, who was a black ufologist, who originally I think was from Pennsylvania. I noticed one of a picture of him, a little story about him was in Gray Barker's Saucer News years ago. So anyway, we investigated some reports around Jacksonville and also around close to Mayport, some that were pretty strange. And of course, this contact who introduced me to Dr. Schwartz was actually Ramona Clark. And she and her husband and her son, Steve, 13 years old at the time, in July of 1967, claimed that they had encountered a dome disc-shaped object, and it was in front of their vehicle, and they followed it, kind of made a rocking motion. It was sort of a 40-foot diameter disc with a dome on top, kind of a gray colored. And then it came to an intersection, and it just sort of waited for them, and they came to the intersection.
It waved?
Huh?
It waved to them?
Yeah, it kind of waited. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
It kind of waited, it seemed, for them to see where they were going to go next, and they came, and then they were going to turn left to go back toward the naval station. And after a short while, it took off to the the installation nearby, and they could hear something being said over the speaker, a loudspeaker, but they couldn't tell what it was. After a while, the 2 jet interceptors came, apparently from Jacksonville Naval Air Station, and she said that the object suddenly started glowing a bright red, and then just took off out of the Atlantic. It looked like the jet interceptors were trying, one on one side, one on the other, try to
wow.
And it just took off and left them, in the dust, so to speak. But afterwards, she had poltergeist activity within 3 or 4 days, and there was eventually it ended up being around 3 o'clock, always around 3 o'clock in the morning. Might have been balls of light or a being standing, next to the bed, and she would say, the Lord's Prayer or something to try to break the spell. She'd be like in a paralyzed state. And at one point, it was just leaning right over it face to face. At first, it was like it took on the appearance of an ex-husband, and that she had years ago.
So a demon.
And well, whatever it was,
I'm sorry. That was too good to pass up. I'm sorry.
But she did. She found an illustration of like this in this magazine that she gave me, which I still have somewhere, where it was this image of like a cat-like face on this being, and she said that's sort of what it looked like. It had like a cat-like face, and unbeknownst, to this guy, Norman Chastain, who lived in Jacksonville at the time, He'd been out on the nearby St. Johns River, I think in '72, and he described um, that there was, an encounter he had with the UFO while he was out fishing one night, and he got over this place called Blunt Island, and then the tide went out, and he got stuck there for a while, and next thing he knew, there was a being with a cat-like face that approached him, and there was a flash of light, and he fell over, and he was paralyzed, and all he could do was lay there, and he provided a artistic illustration done of what it looked like to him. And so he also had a lot of strange dreams at 3 o'clock in the morning of pyramids and stuff on Mars or whatever. And so, there were those similarities. And then, but then there were times that, I think this happens to some experiences. He kind of got off into the flake zone, but he did just, but he did tell me eventually that he had seen these, that being that he saw there on the island. He had seen three beings like that in Georgia. He liked to explore caves, and he was down in the cave, and he saw three beings just like what he saw on the island back in the late 1940s, I think it was. Wow. He said that's what he thought they were at the time, was demons,
Were they in the same area? The caves were in the same area as this experience?
Oh no, this was up in Georgia, I think somewhere near Atlanta.
Okay.
And so it was, hundreds of miles separation there. But anyway, she said that her son Steve began to have the 3 a.m. visitations in his room, and they would be talking about her. He could hear voices. And, he got very scared and came into her room and wanted to sleep, with her, and told her what was happening. She said she hadn't said anything to her son about what she was experiencing. But anyway, she wrote to John Keel and for advice on how to tell him what was occurring and not to freak him out. Just something that might be therapeutic, comforting, or something, to reassure him that everything was going to be all right. And so, anyway, and
well, that really, it doesn't sound like something that would make you, even with John Keel, okay? It just seems like you wouldn't be reassured just off the hoof like that. Yeah, that's so radical. And it's so radical even in that time period when people were having.
Yeah, I know that Keel had written an article, and I don't know if it was before then or not, but called Bedroom Invaders, where a lot of people who experienced or claimed to have seen, figures, maybe shadow people or whatever, soon after experience something appearing in their bedroom and says. So I think the idea too maybe was to reassure him that he wasn't the only one to undergo this experience, and in the end he would be okay, like everybody else that had experienced it. But anyway, and then later Ramona went to Brooksville, Florida, which is on the other side of Florida, on the Gulf side, and it had been known to have a lot of UFO and Bigfoot activity at the time. And
I didn't know about the Bigfoot activity.
Yeah, Joanne Whitnore for like Saucer Scoop magazine. She began writing a lot of material with Brad Steiger back at that time, and see, in 1969, I was on the board of directors to represent the state of Maine, which is where I was born and raised. And Brad Steiger was the public relations director. And I hadn't really connected with him at that time, but I was familiar with him because of his books and so on, and magazine articles. And he and Joanne started writing. And in those articles, it told about like the John Reeves case in March of 1965, the man who claimed that he was out walking outside his home and he encountered what he later thought was a robot, a humanoid being that had a little box like thing, and it put it up in front of him, and it
Okay.
flashed a bright light, and he thought maybe his picture was taken. And then the being got in a flying disc and took off in the air. And when I visited him, uh, uh, when while I was in the Navy and in the area, I got to sit down and talk with him, and there were people that were just stopping by and walking around his property. He had built a replica of the flying saucer, which is sort of, I think, up on a hill behind his house. And then he had these little globes that were on like little posts to represent the different planets that he apparently later claimed that he was taken aboard a UFO and flown up into the solar system. So that was something that was quite entertaining. And then but there was also a lot of Bigfoot activity in Brooksville and the surrounding areas. And so Ramona teamed up with another investigator, and they were going on a lot of field work there. And I went over, and they took me to this ranch where they had seen Bigfoot themselves. The ranch family claimed they were having a lot of experiences, and this investigator working with Ramona was named Dwayne. And he said that he went out in the driveway one night, and a big disc with large rectangular windows flew over his head. And as we were going there, Ramona says, "Now this section of road right here, 2-lane country road, uh, that a ball of light had landed in front of her car and then leaped back up into the air." And so, and I had told Ramona, I says, because I think she expressed that she felt like at least the Bigfoot thing was more physical than the UFO thing. It was going to be
Yeah.
different, but she had decided at one point, nah, it's the same old thing. and it was all mixed in, Brent. And yeah, I think she started leaning more and more on the religious interpretation of it. But
Right.
I had gone to um, I'm not even sure how this turned out all these years later, but there was a guy in Long Island who told me uh, there was some people down in Somerset, New Jersey, just about, I guess, about an hour or so outside of Manhattan. And it was a wooded area, but they had Bigfoot going on there. They had witnesses, and there was a local doctor, but he was ready to travel somewhere, even to Maine, if he could. I mean, I had contact with him, but they didn't want him involved because they felt that he would shoot it, and got it. And
Oh.
they called it Cousin It. So they wanted me to come
Oh.
down just to interview the people.
They were trying to save Cousin It. I
Cousin
could
It.
see that. I would try to
So
save Cousin It.
yeah. So I talked to several people. One guy claimed that he was walking down the road. This is about 2 months before I got there, and he heard footsteps behind him. And he turned around with his flashlight, and he was face to face with the Bigfoot. And he said, next thing he knew, there was this high frequency noise and a little ball of light, a little very small ball of light. Apparently, this sound was emitting. And he said he was frozen at that point. He couldn't move, and the Bigfoot appeared to be frozen. After a while, the light and the sound turned off, and the Bigfoot turned around and went the other way, and he continued on his way home in the dark because this was at night. Um, and I don't
Just
know.
wandered on.
Yeah, I just want, and I know in Flipville, Tennessee, which is about, I don't know, about 70 miles east of me here. I'm in Waynesboro, Tennessee, South Central, and I would go over there, and back around 1976, there were three houses in a row on this lane, country out in the country, and everybody in each of those houses had a story to tell. And this one guy told me that anytime the the Bigfoot was around, there were these balls of light just over the treetops, moving around, and that came to the attention of the National Enquirer back at the time. Because one of the houses, there was a young boy standing in the open doorway, I think about 4 years old, and the creature reached for him, and the family member pulled the child inside. And whether it was going to try to kidnap him or just, reach out to him, pet him on the shoulder or something. But anyway, it made a sensational story for the Enquirer. Uh, but when I went there, there was actually a guy that later wrote up an article about his visit. He was from New York, and he'd been to Loch Ness as a skin diver, and so he got interested and came down from New York and wrote an article up about. And I met him, uh, after spending a few hours. I said, "Well, I'm going to head out." He says, "Oh, you're not going to stay here this evening?" And nah, it's okay. I got to get back to Waynesboro. And wouldn't you know it, I left, and strange things happened. There were strange noises and stuff.
It's the way that goes, right?
Yeah, yeah, I figured
It's
that. They
so
just,
frustrating.
yeah. But anyway,
That's pretty cool, though. I mean, and
yeah,
this is all very short time frame.
yeah, this was all going on back.
Just
You
this.
know, I was very involved there in this, in the 70s,
Hmm.
and came across, those cases, and even up in Palermo, Maine, which I used to go to, there was circular areas in a field up there, and there were people claimed they'd seen UFOs, they'd seen ghosts or whatever, a lot of high strange things, and Bigfoot. There was a family, the husband and wife both had their own separate sightings of a hair covered upright walking creature uh, that quite puzzled them. And while I was in the Navy, I came in. This was in around October '73 to visit my mom and dad, and there in the newspaper was an illustration of a flying disc that was seen out in that area. And I go out there, and lo and behold, they were related to the other people I had been interviewing. And got me to thinking, well, maybe there's a connection between family connections and for some reason, and people seeing these things. Uh,
Let me ask you a question. Because you were so able and willing to travel to go and see where people were having experiences, did you ever go up to New Hampshire?
yeah, I used to visit Betty Hill, and there's an APRO investigator uh, named Walter Hicken. Um, I had read that there was a sighting around Keene, New Hampshire, in January 1969. And, as I say, I was a teenager. I didn't have my driver's license. So my dad and mom, we got in this, I guess, I can't remember, I think it was a Saab. And later we had a Volvo. And I don't know how we, other than just maybe going around and asking locals, where people seen UFO. And we found this place, identified what we'd been told was the residence of these people, but it was
Okay.
late, so there was a pond with a little parking area below this hill, and so we decided in the morning we'll drive up there. So we slept in the car, and in the morning drove up, and I had my little pad of paper, and pencil, pen, and there was a young girl named Mary Ann who was outside with one of her younger, siblings, and so I got out, identified who I was, where I was interested, and I heard they'd had a UFO, and she said, "Yeah, yeah, we saw it was a strange light, and we have some horses, and the horses seem to be disturbed by its presence, and Well, essentially that was it.
Yeah.
We traveled a good distance, but I wrote up a little report, and I think I took a picture of the area, and then then I learned about this Walter Hicken from the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization who handled reports, and so yeah, that was pretty cool. Got to write him, and then later we came back to Keene, and I got to visit with him, and he was telling me some stories, and then eventually he came over to him and one of his investigators came and spent some time over in my you know in Maine and visited us and came to the house, and I contacted one of those newspaper reporters I had met when going through the microfiche at the Daily Kennebec Journal Investor, and he came and did a story on how he gave a little talk in our living room on UFOs, and had some other people who were locals who had seen things. So yeah, it was that was my early beginnings, and I
Well, it's
probably
quite traumatic, though. I
so
mean, at 17, it's crazy.
yeah, it was. Let's see, I started out at 14, and then of course, let's see, I'm not sure how old I was at the time that he came to visit. It wasn't too long afterwards, maybe
Okay.
16, 17. But they checked out some of our local stories and so on. But anyway, of course, there's been a lot of water on the bridge since then. But I, I don't know.
Well, but it's really interesting to me because it's such a neat thing to be involved from that age up. Um, we have Carl and I a friend named Nick Muley who started very young with ghost hunting, and
Mhm.
well before driving, and like you, was catching rides to go and investigate and see what he could see. He's written several stories about, or several books of stories about people's experiences and his. And it just seems like, there's such a, and I used to hold the opinion that kids, younger people, should not be doing this research because I felt like you could be influenced by what you encountered. That can happen to you when you're old too,
Mhm.
if you're so inclined. So I
Yeah.
realized that that was a moot point. But you know, it's interesting because I never felt like I had something happen around me that was a negative thing when I was investigating young. Did you? Did you ever feel like you were endangered by what you were looking into?
No, I hadn't really. But I know that there are some people. It's a very positive experience. Some of it's very, very negative. So either it's the intelligence or the presence or the energy that because it seems like a lot of times uh, the phenomena almost seems, as Keel said, reflective, like um, it kind of reads you and knows about your beliefs and your interests, and maybe shows you sometimes what you are prone to, process, how you're prone to process something. Maybe if you think it's um, George Adamski's buddies from Venus, and that's what you'll experience. And if you think they're demons, maybe that's what you'll experience, and maybe it's psychotherapeutic in their minds to expose you to. I don't know, and maybe we project, like poltergeist activity. A lot of parapsychologists say we project a lot of these things, and maybe some of this stuff is certainly a projection. I think it's certainly more complicated than a lot of mainstreamers realize, and
Yes.
I think it's important to try to connect all the dots. That a lot of the things we put in separate boxes or separate files from the others, like uh, to a Bigfoot hunter, a lot of them don't want to, touch upon the UFO thing. Although it seems like in recent years, more and more are describing seeing orbs in connection with the Bigfoot. But like I say, that was
Mhm.
back in 76, 77, I was coming across kind of like an orb type phenomena associated with some of the Bigfoot things. Maybe they just weren't noticing it back then because their mindset was set against trying to connect it with other things. It was probably not connected. If someone said it's like if you have a what's believed to be a haunted house and a light appears in and around it, it's the spirit. Then if it's a place where a UFO has been seen and that happens, they'll think, oh, it's a little probe or orb from monitoring us, from a UFO. And I know I wrote someone one time from Duke University, and I expressed my interest in UFOs, and they said, "Oh, well, that's a separate subject." So that ended that conversation.
Yeah.
But thank goodness there are people like D. Scott Rogo and Jeffrey Mishlove who have worked in the psychological, parapsychological community, and Dr. Berthold Schwartz. And I was when I worked with the Dr. Individual Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial and Extraordinary Experiences, there was people I made friends with there, like Bob Davis. He was a PhD neuroscientist. And of course, you got people like Gary Nolan, who was at Stanford, and does all these different analysis on things, supposedly fragments from UFOs, or studies other technical areas of the experience. And interestingly, so many of these people coming out of the woodwork are also experiencers themselves. Gary Nolan, was as a child experiencer. Jacques Vallée, when he was about 16 over in France, saw a UFO with his mother. I mean, so Alio Sprinkler, Coral Lorenzen, all of them, before they became researchers, they were experiencers too, And so anyway, where were we? Oh yeah. Well, I thought I might mention about a case that I thought was quite interesting. I need to follow it up even more, but I don't know if you're familiar with it, Anthony Peak over in
Anthony
England.
Peak, I am. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I do know him.
Well, I think I was one of the first ones to interview him for an American magazine. He was trying to get over here for a number of years, and finally, he's now kind of a regular on the Contact in the Desert circuit out in California.
He is, yeah.
But when I first contacted him, it was near-death experiences, and I was really impressed by how he brought so much material together. And studied all these different things about the brain, physics, and so on that need to be brought to the table. And we were, in fact, I ought to send you a link to my first interview with him. He was talking.
I would love to see that.
Yeah,
how long ago was
that? That was when his first book had come out on near-death experiences, and I think he's had about a dozen new ones since then. I think he's at the point where he says he's not going to write any more, but we'll see. But yeah, he has some real interesting ideas. The daemon, the hidden self, or whatever. And he got talking about how the daemon, this inner knowing, he said it was in the interview, the first interview, he said it's in the right hemisphere of the brain. And I told him about the John Keel story in the Mothman Prophecies, where this lady on Long Island, who was an experiencer, and he claimed that he had hypnotized her, and this voice came through her, this alien presence, and predicted some airplane crashes that came true. And he got excited and he says, "Yeah, Brent, that's the daemon. That's this hidden inner self. Sometimes it comes through the brain, bright brain, and he said that's very significant." He says, "In fact, I remember Keel." He says, when Operation Trojan Horse came out, which was in 1970, me and some of my hippie friends over in Liverpool, we just love that book. So if you ever contact Keel again, tell him that which I never did get to do that, but tell him that
Well,
he
I'd
visits
love to get
you.
to see him again. He
But
was really, he's so smart and he's so interesting. And
I mean, he's a
um,
deep dive into so many
yeah,
things. And yeah, I was real honored when he invited me out to his uh, consciousness hour just before my book on John Keel came out. Um, and he wrote another one called The Hidden Universe, which deals with a lot of the
mhm,
UFO type archetypes or
yes.
appearances. So, yeah, I think we need a lot of people like that delve deeply into all of these different elements that often get overlooked. The psychic elements, the paranormal. That's a whole landscape.
I
In fact, I think it was
have a question.
I think it was 2016 that he introduced me to a gentleman who was a Croatian Croatian Canadian music inventor. In fact, he said he's a modern Tesla. you know, Nikola
Oh,
Tesla, and
yes.
he's now
That's
Swiss based, but he's been creating inventions that help a lot of people using sound waves and electrical fields. And when he was very young, he had an NDE at age 6, out of body. He drowned, but they revived him on this beach. And then at 17, he had an experience in Canada where he was helping with a rock band, and they were having a concert, and the doggone amplifier went out on him. A fuse blew, and so they didn't have time to run to town and get a new fuse. So this gentleman was trying to be real creative, and he asked a friend if he could give him a piece of uh, a film, a tinfoil from a cigarette packaging. He was going to roll it up and stick it where the fuse went. And then he was going to take another thing and insert it, and he got this bright flash. People were mortified because it threw him across the stage in the air. But what happened to him was that it was like these little flashes, and you saw like the stars, like there was thousands of stars, and they took the shape of a human figure, and
wow.
and he was changed after that. He A few weeks later, he had this came upon this entity that he called he, she, it because he couldn't tell male or female or what it was. But eventually it identified itself as Kalaman. And it gave him lots of information. And he said, well, how am I ever going to prove that any of this is real? People are going to say I'm having hallucinations. And it's told him, I will give you proof. And so because he's a friend of Anthony, I when I found out about this, just right
Mhm.
after we met, I got his contact information. I wrote him myself. I even talked with him, did a Skype interview with him. And I mean, he's experienced all kinds of out of body experiences, deja vu experiences, out of body, and UFOs. Uh, yeah, I made some notes. He also
UFOs
precognition.
like experiencing them or abducted.
Yeah, he's had a lot of experiences, and it seems like it all started with this uh, kind of electrocution type event. Um, but here's where, to me, I want to just read this to you. This is what he wrote me, and this is where he got his proof. He says, I was suddenly startled by a woman who was standing next to me. This was over in Europe. A cousin of his was having a wedding, and he kind of broke away, and he was on the beach by himself. Uh, she was tall, dark hair, and brilliant green eyes. She wore a long, dark coat. She was ageless, neither young nor old, beautiful. She took my right hand and placed an object in the upturned palm. The object was cool to the touch, wet, almost translucent. I felt a tingling sensation that radiated from my hand up through my arm and slowly moved throughout my entire body. In a voice that felt like it was coming from the inside of my head, she said, "This is yours. You know who it is from. Take care of it. It is important." And then he continued, "I took a moment to examine the object in my hand, and when I looked up, she was gone. And the object appears to be made of some unknown substance. Um, now, Anthony Peake has written that I have seen the object, and this was last year, I think. In fact, it was in I don't have it here, a book he wrote, Near Death Experiences. And it is very intriguing indeed. Um, Intriguing. Indeed, over the years, he has worked with a number of scientific laboratories to identify what the object is made of. To date, it has proven a total mystery, refusing to give up its secrets to either spectrometry or tunnel scanning microscopy. And I it's just kind of a phenomenal thing.
It's
I
kind of
really
an
think,
interesting thing, though. I mean,
yeah, this sounds like it could be the one. It seems like when they take it into these labs to study, the equipment breaks down, as I recall. But he's been to different laboratories trying to get an analysis done on it. It's a small coin-sized object, and it's got like these 8 bumps around it in the circle. And they've noticed and filmed, he said, where in this room where I think sometimes it'll kind of glow, and there will be clocks that suddenly speed up. And he's been given, I think, years ago when I wrote to him, he said he had about 300 notebooks where he gets this information how to create technology. And so he's inventing technology that helps people to overcome different physical and mental problems. And uh, he wrote me one time saying that they had gotten approval over there in Switzerland to include his, help with people on insurance. So I mean, it seems to be that he's creating quite an impression with what his work is. And I notice in this book that Anthony just wrote, which devotes several pages to this gentleman. That in the past I used his name, but he didn't give his name in the book. So I'm wondering if maybe because of the medical work and research he's doing, maybe just doesn't want to put out the name. But I know who it is, and
well, but the thing of it
there's
is
been quite a
somebody
bit
that's
that
doing,
actually he's also been patient.
but somebody that's doing that kind of work is, they're always going to be
Mm-hmm.
cautious, and that's just the way that goes. But how cool that you were able to be, to be aware of him and to know what he's doing. I mean,
Yeah, if I hadn't been, interviewing Anthony again, I think the second or third time, I wouldn't have had that, that moment where um, he mentioned, well, he mentioned a number of things, but that one really caught my eye, and I asked him further, about if I could reach out to the gentleman and find out more. So I was grateful that and appreciated that he did that. And I mean, it's a heck of a story, and you wonder. And you have these stories about different people. I mean, Albert K. Bender, the UFO researcher in Canada back in the early 50s, the so-called apparitional men in black. Of course,
I just,
he was, he had an object that was given to him, and it was supposed to be connecting him with the MIB. And it was supposed to have some kind of energy, but that was a very negative, that was a very negative experience he had. Whereas this gentleman, his experience is very positive and is helping him do things that are, very helpful to a lot of people, it seems. So totally different scenario, but still it's kind of interesting that some experiences do describe. And one of the reasons why when I was working with Free there, the Dr. Edgar Mitchell group, that, I got to create with Ray Hernandez's help, a special site, a survey for people who had actually seen some sort of technology or instruments. Um, I didn't really exactly find the kind of things I was looking for, but it was still interesting. There was a lot of things that people observed, the aliens handling doing medical procedures and things, syringes or objects that had certain vibrations to them or whatever. But anyhow,
Well, I missed the very last part of that. So, and I apologize. I'm having some audio issues. But will you say the very last part again?
uh, the survey that I helped, a special survey that we did to go ahead and get people's responses if they'd had an experience with a technology that the non-human aliens or whatever had introduced them to, maybe in a medical examination or something, to give us the details. So we had I think it was about 8 or 9 different points that we wanted them to answer. And we got over 100 while I was involved. And I don't think they ever did anything with it. I went ahead and copied all the responses from my own files that we got,
Yeah.
But anyway, it's intriguing. Right now, I'm in touch with someone I'm just looking into, and he says that he had someone who worked in the school system when he was a young boy, and he was it was really a very disturbing experience. Like he went into another dimension, and he was introduced to some sort of power object that allowed him to uh, sense things, different vortexes or whatever, and he went into this one place that had this all these objects floating around in this place he was at, and then he um, says that that object eventually was taken away from him, but it was given to him by some entity. And he says it was. He said it was kind of like the Strange Things TV show, where suddenly you're in this other realm.
Yeah.
And and this person helped him, knew John Keel, and put him in touch with him, and he actually talked with Keel on the phone. He said, so I'm looking into that. His first experiences like that happened in Texas, and then he was just out in Oklahoma last year, and he just recently moved back to Tennessee, not too far from Nashville.
Okay.
So, so I'm, just looking at that, see what. But some of the things he mentions are, kind of interesting. Kind of reminds me of this case that I just mentioned from the guy that's over in Switzerland. The object was certain powers that are, not
Yes.
exactly the same, but anyway. Uh,
The owl thing is weird.
the
I
what?
think the owl, I think that the owls are
Oh, yeah,
a little bizarre.
owls and deer. The screen memories, as Bud Hopkins called them. And
Yeah.
I had the one there. I think I probably told the last time I was on that was up here in Spring Hill, Tennessee. Uh, I
Yeah.
heard through MUFON they had a guy up there that had seen him and his wife a UFO. Get up there and investigate, Brent. You're closer, so because he was based in Memphis, it was good 150 miles for him one way, and it was only about 65, 70 miles for me. So I went up there, and Not surprisingly for me, I found there was more to it. He and a twin brother of his, who lived in New York at the time, had all kinds of experiences, and one of them was when he himself was hunting in up in New York State with some friends, but he went out by himself, and he said that there was a deer about 50 yards away or something like that, and but he didn't feel like shooting it. And then all of a sudden, it turned into a silver-suited man, and he held up a silvery globe in his hand, and all of a sudden, the globe levitated out of the being's hand, and then shot right up to his face. And then next thing he knew, he was picking himself up off the ground, and the deer, the being were all gone. Nothing there. But
Yeah.
I had just interviewed somebody, a country singer, stuntman up in Nashville. His story was back around 1976 out in Las Vegas, and it was already well known, investigated. But uh, his story was of a being up there outside of Las Vegas in the desert. He was looking for some place he'd been to years before, and I think he got lost. And then his car stopped, and he was trying to had the hood up, trying to figure out what's going on. And there's this object in the sky which he assumes is a blimp, no big deal. But then suddenly there's like a flash, and there's two humanoid beings, human-like beings. He didn't know for sure they weren't human. But one approached him and held out his left hand again, and he has this globe that expands a little bigger than it was in the beginning, hovers there, and there's these explosions of light on the surface of this spinning orb. And he gives them the message that this represented like nuclear technology going off, and that we need to be careful. Our carelessness with this technology could be very detrimental, not only to us but to them. Yeah. And then he has a series. And then he has these series of experiences. That even Keel kind of like, I don't know, but it was very similar to some of these other elements. Like he is talking to a couple of people about what happened to him. And as he's talking, two men come in, and they happen to look very much like the guy he met in the desert. And they say they're from Sirius, like the dog star Sirius. These beings, we're from, or they are from Sirius. And, they're like, who was that? Because he gave this brief message and then took off, both of them. And so they run down the hallway, and they get to the parking lot, and there's nothing, How could they have done, And then they went to a place where he'd been in a meeting with somebody, and he wanted to find, see if anybody was still there. This guy, the owner of the place, says nobody's been in there for years, and opened the door. Not a sign of any life there. And he says, "What is going on?"
Definite high strangeness.
Yeah, it was definitely high strange, and so I started researching. I found, there's a number of cases of objects, spherical objects in the left hand. I talked to a psychologist who said, well, we'll take a cell phone, put it on our left hand, we'll click it with our right hand. So it's got nothing to do necessarily, Brent, with handedness. I said, yeah, but, there may be another aspect to this. I don't know. I mean, I know that there's a book that Dr. Schwartz told me to read, so I got a hold of it. It's the Encyclopedia of Psychic Science by Dr. Nanda Forder. And in that book, he described how many times psychic mediums who were right-handed would suddenly become left-handed while they were in a trance state. And they would, even the one that was investigated by a psychologist, overseas somewhere, he called it the Martian language, and I think her last name was Representative Smith. she claimed that she was a psychic medium, and whenever she was in trance, this was like back in the 1890s, and Keel used to lament that, there's been very little research done on this since then, but if she was pinched like on her right side from behind, she would react on her left side, and she would, change her handedness doing things. And we even had a UFO contactee out in California, Brian Scott, got from California back in the 70s, who was seen to go into a trance and do this automatic reading, and his skin changed. It was grayish like, and he was like in a deep trance. And the lady said that he was looking straight ahead at the wall while he was doing the drawing, and he was using his left hand instead of, he's right-handed, yet he was using his left hand to do the drawing. And he did some pretty, sophisticated looking drawings, buildings and stuff, and floor plans or whatever, and whatever technical
That
looking
is
things.
so weird. I think that's weird.
I think it's, I mean, if we can find things that correlate, that give us some kind of insight or understanding and how certain brain functions work or whatever. I know that with Ramona that I mentioned earlier down in Florida, when the poltergeist activity happened, she was hearing a male voice always on her left side calling her name. And Anthony Peake tells a story in one of his books about a gentleman who for about 30 years had been hearing a voice out of his left ear. And he always just ignored it, I got a psychological thing going on, but then it told him that he didn't need to take this plane trip overseas, that something bad was going to happen if he went. And he just brushed it aside till the voice kept insisting. And so finally he got, he said, heck with it, I'm not going to go. There was an earthquake and a tsunami where he would have been. He could have been killed, And so then he started paying attention. And then the Arago, the surgeon of the rusty knife, which Dr. N.G.P. Hart was involved with, and John Fuller wrote the book, tells about this spirit that would, this Brazilian peasant would suddenly do these, take a rusty knife and operate on people, and was successful. And, and he said that he was the voice of this doctor who used to live years ago and he died, would speak in his left ear and tell him what to do,
Yeah.
And so I just got to noticing it. I mean, it's patterns. What does it mean? I mean, I think that somehow it's, these things could be related to how they interact with us through, paranormal means or whatever. So I'm always looking for anything that, like the 3 a.m. factor too. Even John Keel mentioned that aspect of. And I noticed in DMT, the spirit molecule by psychologist Rick Strassman, besides DMT, he talked about how around 3 o'clock in the morning, the brain goes through a change. And psychologists have even nicknamed it what did they nickname it? The 3 a.m. wow. Where suddenly you wake up at 3 a.m. and you get this great idea that popped into your head.
Yes.
Or
And you
have,
never write it down, and then it's gone when you get up in the morning.
oh, well.
Well,
I
in
guess
my case.
But yeah, there's a lot of these 3 a.m. paranormal things too. And then,
But I will say that I started keeping a notebook beside my bed. This stuff started when I was um, probably a junior in high school.
mhm.
It continued. Um, there were times that I was in more of a self protection and survival mode coming through my young adulthood, but I always keep a notebook beside my bed because I
Well, I've
will
done it.
wake up,
Mhm.
and if I don't write it down, it's gone.
Yeah, I've
Some
noticed.
of them have been good ideas, but I think they're more suggestions.
What aggravates me, I'll wake up and I'll think I'll remember this later, And then I
Never.
remember I had this dream, but I'm telling Joan, my wife, I'm saying, I had this dream and I knew at the time. I laid in bed and I said, I need to tell Joan this. It was clear in my head at the time, but now that I'm here with you a few hours later, and all I remember is I had a dream and I don't, and I was going to tell you, and I don't know what it was. So yeah, it's good to write stuff down. I used to
With your,
journal.
I was going to ask you a question before we move on, if that's okay.
Yeah,
With the
go ahead.
people that you have done this research with, just the conversations that you've had relevant to this, the people that get these messages, do they feel like they are? Because mine a lot of times are protection. Like I will be not too far past that. I will be moving through life, and I will come across the person that was in my dream, or a conversation that was, that I recognize, and based what I know happened, then that's how I behave in that situation. And I feel like when I have those experiences, it's usually about protection. And do other people that have that you've spoken with that do this, do they also have that?
Yeah, I'm thinking right now of a Tennessee and Yukon investigator. She's passed away now, but Angela Shear, um, she wrote one book on UFOs. It's sad because she was going to do another one, and she said this one will deal with all these high strange things, Brent. But unfortunately, she developed a brain tumor and kind of life shot. But she was telling me that when she was young, that there was some people that were killed, and she had kind of like a full warning of it, and she was able to get away and protect herself. She didn't know how she knew to do that, but she just had this strong understanding that if she didn't get out of this situation away from these people, that she was going to end up, you know, either injured or dead. But she just knew something bad
Right.
was going to happen. And yeah, I think there's a number of people that just have these inner knowings or warnings. Um, I think I've had some things, and they weren't really bad things, but they were things that helped through my experience, um, and nothing like what a lot of other people experience. But they were enough to let me know that uh, other people have these experiences. So it gave me, I felt like a better understanding of some of the processes, like the
Mm.
synchronicity and the dream process and visions, whatever. For example, we used to have a sweat lodge behind a house. We had a Native American friend down in Alabama who used to lead sweats, and my wife Joan is part Cherokee, and she's very proud of her Indian heritage, and so we used to have a sweat lodge. We lived on a hill behind our house, and so we had some really cool sweats. And sometimes we had people come along that even needed understanding and help with like UFO type stuff that would come up.
Right.
I had this strange experience, but I know that there was a time that I felt we needed to go to a certain sacred site, and there was something there that I was supposed to see. I had no idea what it was,
Right.
and I went there, and I remember the lady who we were, I guess you could say, apprenticing on and working with, who used to lead sweats. Um, she was getting kind of upset with me because I was going around looking at petroglyphs and writing it down, taking pictures. And she says, "Come over here, and just sit your ass on this rock. Get out of your own head." I says, "I can't. I'm sorry. I'm too." And so,
Sit there.
so the next time we had a sweat, maybe a couple weeks later, it came to me, and it was an image that I saw on one of the rocks. And okay, this is it. I'm not sure I really fully understand it yet, but at first, what it was is I was seeing like these concentric circles, and I'm analyzing like, okay, this hot this hot air is causing something to happen to my eyeballs. But then all of a sudden it changed from that uh, to this thing that resembled what I'd seen down there at on this rock. And what it was I was seeing like a cactus, but it also resembled one of the things I was trying to figure out what it was on the rock. And why there would be a cactus in Alabama and Bankhead Forest, I don't know. But anyway, but yeah, there's been a number of synchronicities, and I I I think I found triggers for it. Like I know one time um, I was kind of struggling with my own understanding of religion and such, and I was kind of at an emotional crisis point. It was back in 1975, and so people were telling me, "You got to do this. You got to speak in tongues, or you got to be baptized in water." And I kept saying, "Well, I feel like when I confessed, that I accepted Christ, I thought that was all I had to do. Now you're telling me all these other things." So I just, said, let me just ask Creator. Well, that's what I decided to do. I don't know if I told anybody, but about 2 nights later, I'm not even thinking about what I had said. I'm just crawling in bed at 11 o'clock after night, and all of a sudden I find myself about a bed and going toward the door because the light in my room was off. My dad was still getting ready to go to bed. He was making his little bathroom pit stop outside. Um, the hall light was on. That was it. And but I only went about halfway, and then suddenly I stopped, and all of a sudden I'm looking at the door. The whole time I'm just looking at the door that's lit up, leading out into the hallway, and I have this knowing that someone is behind me, holding me back, even though I don't feel a hand or anything. I'm just being held back by someone. And
Right.
that didn't bother me. I just kept looking toward the door. And all of a sudden, there were all these little tiny, round, marble-sized, little glowing, pulsating, white, clear balls of white light just swarming around. It looked like there were hundreds of them. And they
Right.
seemed to be forming like a four-legged white glowing animal at the base of the uh, the door. And then just like that, unfortunately, I was kind of upset by this part. Suddenly, I'm back in bed. I'm in the bed. I don't even remember walking back, and I'm just laying on
Right.
my bed, looking up at the ceiling, like, okay, what was that all about? But in the prayer, I'd ask that, because whenever you're dealing with like, show me something, a sign. I don't know what the sign would be, and I know that like reading some of the Bible, like the Book of Revelation. Hey, some of that stuff can be quite frightening. So nothing to be scared of. So not only was I not scared, I had no emotion at all. So I survived that one pretty good.
That's
but
pretty good.
but then years later, never figuring out exactly other than just energy, spirit energy, and it's in all of life form, even four-legged animals, is in my mind kind of went over time. Uh, but then 2019, so prayer is one thing that worked as a trigger, and then I remember hearing about Carl Jung's meditation on what you call active imagination, and so I decided to start that process one night, and I was trying to relax and just visualize things and not be real analytical, just see what forms, let it go, and eventually I fall asleep and I wake up something like 2 o'clock in the morning. And I had this dream that I was back in that room in Maine. Now I didn't plan to go to that room in Maine, but that's where I ended up at. And there were people around, and they were kind of, I don't know, they kind of bothered me. I called them inspectors for some reason. And right about where I think I would have been in the dream where I was held back, there was my mother who was passed on. And I asked where Dad was. She said, "Oh, he's around." And so I went over, we hugged, and that would have been the place that I was stopped at in the room. Okay, um, and then it was over. Well, there's a lady up in Nashville who had her mother back around 1957 in Texas one night had a contact, alien contact, UFO being landed outside the house, and she tried to get understanding from her local pastor at the church, and I think recommended her maybe see a psychologist. Those things aren't real or whatever. And anyway, since then she developed psychically, became a member of the Edgar Casey organization. She had two daughters, and they both live in Nashville. And so I've been, learning things from them. But what started it was uh, this woman that I've been in touch with, interested in UFOs, uh, wrote me that she had a very unusual dream. It was about me. Can I share it with you? And of course, So anyway, in her dream, which ended up being the night before that I woke up on this day, but then I thought, well, the night before would have been when I was planning to do this, and I started it the night before. It was into the morning, the next morning. But anyway, her dream, not knowing about what happened to me, uh, I was at this place. She was there, and her mother, who is the contactee, who is no longer alive either. So this is her mother. Mine was my mother. And
Right.
I come with a group of people. Maybe you could consider them inspectors because we were in a vehicle, a van, as TV repair people, of all things. And she says that, that her mother was talking to me,
Right.
telling me that everything was going to be all right, and that not only everything in particular about my wife who has COPD, and I've been kind of worrying about that at that point around that time. And so I'm thinking maybe, I guess that might have been it. And also, she knew me in some way, even though we'd never met on the physical plane. I'm not sure. Comic understanding, I think, is what her daughter told me. But I just thought that was really interesting. About a month later, this other lady contacted me that I had previously met, her and her son and her husband. They had all kinds of weird experiences, ghosts, UFOs, the drill. And then she wrote and says, Brent, I just had this strange experience, and I woke up. I think she said she woke up from a dream and had a sunburn when she woke up. Are you interested? I said, yeah, let's talk this evening. So I called her up, and hers was that there were these group of people. They were all kind of kneeling down around her, low to the floor. There was glass windows around her, and her mother approaches her. Her mother, who had been dead for a number of years, and says, "You don't need to be alone at this time," and comes up to her and hugs her. This was back around late uh, 2018, and then I noticed after that too that a number of times, the lady in Nashville would tell me something that related to something I was researching. She suddenly, like I was researching people who see like orbs, and uh, and then what happened was, it sounds like we're getting some feedback. Anyway, she suddenly saw one in her bedroom, a small object, never had anything like it before, and there was another sighting she had that kind of sounded like something I was also researching at the time. And then one day, my wife and I were headed to a nearby town about 30 miles away, do some shopping or something, a doctor's appointment, whatever. And there was an eagle on the ground to the right of the car, scratching the ground in the field. We hadn't seen an eagle in years. And I get home later, and on Facebook, this friend up in Nashville posts that she had just seen something she hadn't seen the whole time she's lived at this house in Nashville. it was four eagles together, like in a cross type thing, right directly over house, spinning around the circle.
Oh my word.
And that reminded me of an Indian medicine man that I had promised that he'd send me a copy of his book about a year before, and that we would go ahead and do an interview. And his visions concern eagles, you know, together, like two here and then two there, which would be kind of like their cross type thing, spinning around and making a humming sound and then turning into UFOs. And he had this several times. The medicine man told him, "You're going to have a contact experience with the star people." And he says, "That's nonsense. I don't believe that." And then one morning, close to his birthday in March of some year back in the 70s, he was a college educated Native American, by the way. And so he said that he's living in California, and suddenly he wakes up from one of these dreams. But then when he wakes up, the humming is still there. And he gets up and goes into the living room, and there's a big picture window there. And outside the picture window is hovering a flying disc with a dome on top. And he stands there in disbelief, and suddenly there's a flash, and he's aboard the craft.
Wow.
And anyway, he had sent me a book. He wanted to do an interview with me, and he autographed it, everything, and made me feel bad because it was about animal spirits and stuff. And I thought I put it on the back burner. I was supposed to follow up with an interview with him, and I thought, oh, so I looked up about eagles, and I thought, yeah, I blew that one. But it wasn't the first time that the lady in Nashville had actually contacted me about someone. She's kind of like what they call a psychopomp, almost saying that she just knew things or things would happen synchronistically. But yeah, um, so there's just things that happen that are synchronistic, and oh yeah, with I started talking about, we had a sweat lodge. I had this experience one time in this room where this pot office, pot bedroom for me, and I noticed this Indian blanket over on this side facing the west, and it was up on this dresser, and it was like propped up over something. It was a Native American type blanket. Now my wife has one, but I thought, well, why is it draped over there? And I thought, it's over something. I should maybe walk over and pull it off. And well, I got to admit, I got kind of spooked, thinking, what if it's something like the Cherokee Little People? I mean, that would be interesting, but I don't know. It might. I don't want to disturb one of those fellows. Nope. So I just told myself it was I was letting my imagination run wild, and I laid down, turned off the light, and I wasn't thinking about it until I woke up in the morning, and naturally the sun's coming in the window, and oh, guess what? There is no Indian blanket there anymore.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, I blew that. Then about 5 weeks later,
or maybe that was the reaction you were supposed to have.
Maybe. Here's what happened next. Then about 5 weeks later, it's back. Except it wasn't, as I recall, it wasn't draped over. It was just laying there on top. And so I sat up in bed. It was I turned the light on. I woke up for some reason around 2, 3, and I held out my arms and went like this. Okay, I'm awake. I'm sitting up in bed. I pinched myself. I'm awake. In case anybody wonders about that. And as I'm looking at it, I say, I'm still not going to go over there. This is just kind of weird. And so
Brent Raines, that's funny.
So anyway, what happened was I'm looking at it and it starts to blur. Like you're looking at something and you change it got blurry.
Yeah.
Nothing else got blurry, just the blanket, and then it was gone.
Yeah.
So
get out.
I never got a third chance.
You offended it. So you refused the gift or the experience. That is something that I find really interesting because I cannot imagine you refusing an experience like that. That seems so out of character.
Well, I did.
I
I don't know.
might have
It
done
was,
that too. I mean, if something doesn't feel right, I tend to leave it alone.
yeah, and
So,
I've heard, I've heard stories. The little people,
yeah.
they're sometimes they, you gotta treat them the right way, or you might get in trouble. And I thought, but I realized I kept telling myself, Brent, you're just freaking yourself out. I mean, it wasn't like the experience in '75 where I had no, I was perfectly fine with it. This kind of was making me nervous. So,
Well,
but
then you
but I
should
did,
probably pay attention to that. I'm just razzing you a little bit because if I was having those feelings, I would not have either
but
because
I
I
did
trust
see
my
it.
instincts.
Yeah, but seeing it disappear like I did, that was high
Yes,
strange to me. Yeah, and
that's way strange.
but I often analyze things. I was telling someone who claims many experiences, and he says, "Wow, that was quite an experience." But I noticed, Brent, after you told it, then you said, "But then again, I can't tell for sure. Was it somehow in my mind I was projecting or whatever?" And he said, "Oh, Brent, you just ruined it at that point. It was strange. Just leave it alone."
You're just, well, but that's the nature of the beast, right? We try to explain it away. Even
Hmm.
people that are experiencers, and I researched this too, and it's very odd to me if I'm backing away from something, there's a reason for it as a rule. And,
Hmm.
there's, I had an experience with a client that wanted me to come and, experience and investigate her home. And I was just like, nope, I'm sorry. Let me get somebody else. I'm not supposed to be there. And
Hmm.
I've never done that. I've never refused somebody that personally reached out to me like that. And I was just like, I'm sorry, but I do know somebody that I can send over there. And she was like, but I want you. I said, I'm not supposed to do that. And I was right. But for me to have done that was weird. I just,
Yeah.
I I have learned to listen when my guides are saying, "Oh no," you know, because they don't do it very often. But
Yeah.
I got that when I was up in Cherokee, North Carolina. My husband plays poker. We go at Thanksgiving. Everything closes Thanksgiving Day up there. Everything, and you can go get dinner like at the little restaurant, one restaurant. Well, more now since they put them in the casino, but before that, and you're on your own if you're out wandering. If you go up to the theater, you're the only person there. And I'm a woman traveling by myself to do these things, and I have gotten to where up there, I'm because of my background, I'm usually protected, and that's my ancestry. But I am not somebody that's going to just roam around by myself as a rule. And I actually have had a couple of places that I had experiences that weren't bad, but it was just kind of like, yeah, you really need to get out of here. And I
Hmm.
had somebody tell me that once that wasn't standing there. I was like, oh, watch me go, you know. But
Yeah.
if a blanket disappeared in front of me once, it would be just happy to be by itself from that point on. If it showed back up, I'm not going to get up there and get in this business.
Yeah.
But that's fun. That that
Well, yeah. I was just
that was unusual for you.
I was just, I guess I was, maybe that was the point though. Maybe I was supposed to just witness that it wasn't a normal blanket
Yeah,
after all. And I had, you know, proven to myself that I was sitting up in bed and I was, pinched myself and did these movements back and forth with my arms, so that I could tell people too that I was awake. I don't know why twice I saw this blanket. but you know, because now my wife would have been sleeping in the next room. She probably wouldn't have appreciated me waking her up. Hey, I think I see an Indian blanket in here, but yeah, sure, shut up,
But
go
it's
back to
gone
sleep.
now. It's gone
Yeah,
now, indeed. You know, that's trippy. That is trippy. That really
but yeah,
is.
whatever it was, whether it was visionary or physical, I can't say, but I mean, it falls in line with what other people describe, happens, and so I'm not a major experiencer, but and when I got in the field, I always said I'm just an investigator. I've not had any experiences. Now I got
Yeah.
some I can bring out, and but I thought later, like when I was a young kid, I had this recurrent dream, and it was really disturbing to me. I would go into the dining room, and over by where the phone is, there was a place, that went into the wall where the phone would sit, and below it was a little table. And it seemed like it was out of the underneath the table, this thing would lash out at me, and it kept repeating itself over and over, and it swallowed me, and I would be going down this long tunnel, and I could barely move. All I could do was just slide down this tunnel, and it seemed like one night that's all I did all night long, sliding down this tunnel. It was a horrible feeling because I didn't know if I'd ever get out. And I know one time there was, because it just fit my body, that there was actually a little semi wall on one side, and on the other side there were like these little men standing there, like soldiers, as I slid on by, there wasn't even time to talk to them. And finally, it happened again. I knew what was going to happen because I'd been through it a number of times. And so
Right.
when it came out to me, I'm not even sure what it looked like, but I reached out and I took what it would have been its mouth, and instead of it swallowing me, I shut its mouth shut and I woke up. And I never had that dream again. And I was telling Ramona about it, and she said, the lady in Florida, and she said, because she had a lot of experiences, and she said, I believe that's when you shut yourself off psychically. I think you had psychic awareness, and that you were having initiatory experiences, or whatever, and
Right.
you deliberately shut it off, Brent. But that's a good thing in my mind, she said.
Well, shutting it down, there's nothing wrong with that. I
Yeah,
mean,
and
self protection is okay.
yeah,
You look after yourself.
hmm so anyway, but yeah, it's like I say, it's an interesting journey, looking at all these things and trying to connect the dots, trying to make sense of it, and um, I think one of the drawbacks is that a lot of people in the field just, I think it's opening more and more to people exploring these areas, the cross connections and things to a lot of these phenomena. But that's been a long time coming. I thought back in the 70s, you had D. Scott Rogo and you had John Keel, Jacques Vallée, who were pointing the way, and then we kind of got stuck back on Roswell and things, and MJ12, and
Yeah.
you know, the physical encounters. Keel was one of the first to come out with the missing time, and all the cases he was looking into. But it took really later on Bud Hopkins and Willie Strieber and some others to really make it popular because they presented it more in a context that the mainstream appreciated and identified with more than ultra terrestrials, Earth based other dimensions or whatever the Keel was pushing for. And
I would agree with that because it made it more accessible to the average bear, for lack of a better word. I mean, some of the stuff, some of the stuff that I've been exposed, I haven't been doing this that long, 20 years. I mean, compared to most people in the fields, right? But
that's,
experiencing
yeah,
psychically all my life, but experiencing and talking to serious experiencers not that long. And it's so interesting to me because when I got to meet you and we did that, basically it was a conversation. It was a really good conversation. It was fun. but probably not as visually pleasing as it could have been, but that's okay. I was learning, but it was so interesting because you have been researching this for longer than I have, and you have been exposed to so much stuff. I could sit there, and I have tonight because of my um, problems with my listening side. You know, I had to really focus, but I have been able to learn from you through both of these conversations things that I would never have gotten just sitting at a conference or, you know, although that's great. I'm not dissing that whatsoever. But it's interesting to talk to somebody that has this background and that has this time in the research because it's important. And getting a chance to expose it to other people that aren't going to see that necessarily any other place, I think it's really cool and a big deal. And the fact that you put out your magazine and everything, I mean, you do such a good job of sharing that.
No, I appreciate that. I always found going to the conferences, which I hadn't really been to that many, but when I did, um, a lot of times I didn't even bother to go to hear what they said because I knew, like Stan Friedman, I knew what he was going to say already because
Everybody knows what I was going to say.
But it was very interesting to kind of circulate out in the lobby or whatever and meet other people. And
Yes.
So, what do you think about this? And they say, "Well, I've been investigating this stuff down here in Kentucky. Yeah, we had this case once, and we start corresponding afterwards, and you gather a lot of networking material. You meet people and you make connections, become friends, and in the field, and because back in the early days we didn't have internet, and to make a phone call could be quite expensive, but you generated some great letters, and you get sometimes copies of reports and newspaper clippings and whatnot, photographs, and
Yeah.
sometimes this material was even better than what you get on the internet a lot of times, on a personal level. But anyway, and I remember one of my early experiences. My dad took me down to Richmond, Maine. It was about, I guess, 17 or so miles from where I lived in Hull near Augusta. And he knew this gentleman who, back in the fall of 1949, had seen this bright, dazzling light flying overhead. He had just got home from work. He parked his car in the garage, was shutting the door, and suddenly there was a flash of light. He thought at first maybe his headlights come on, and then he realized, oh, it's making a sound, a hissing sound, and it's this brilliant. I think he said it was greenish blue, and it was flying overhead. And it wasn't all that high up, it didn't seem, but it temporarily blinded him. And for 3 or 4 days afterwards, his eyes kind of bothered him, and he had spots before his eyes. And he called the newspaper office in Augusta that night. Nobody else reported it. Then he went and called them the next morning. Again, no one else saw it, but he thought surely there had to be other people that would have seen this thing. And he watched it, I think, for a pretty good while as it went from one side, one area of the sky to the other. I can't remember, south to north or something, which going north, it should have been visible in a lot of places, and from Augusta and Hull. But anyway, it's I remember I remember as a kid back around 1968, and I thought I was just losing my mind. I had this feeling that a bright object was going to fly along and this actually happened, the western horizon. So I sat by a window of the house at the foot of the stairs by the garage, and I just kept looking out the window. And finally, I thought, "Yeah, this is just too much. I'm just
Right.
losing my mind. I don't know anything." So I get up and I go off and start doing something. The phone rings, and a friend of mine calls and says, "Brent, he was, of course, years older than me. He was Jim Carrey, and we, would call each other up now and then, visit each other. He had a deep interest in UFOs, and he would, anyway, he said, people have been seeing this bright ball of fire going from north to south off in the west. Damn it all.
No way.
And, if I had stayed there a little bit longer, I would have seen this. It was in the paper the next day,
Yeah.
the Daily Catholic Journal, and it told that it was seen as far away as New York. Um, I assume it was just a fireball, but for some reason I was picking up on this. It seemed like,
Yeah.
because of my interest in UFOs and astronomy and whatever's out there,
Yeah.
and so I, you know, I kind of chalked it up. I never made much. I hardly ever mentioned it, but I mean, it just seemed like that was a pretty wild coincidence, to say the least.
Indeed. Yeah.
You know, and I don't have too many things that happen like that, but every once in a while, it's like this is so synchronistic. It's not even synchronistic. Sometimes it's like I had a brief moment of a psychic
Yeah.
intuition or something. There was one time I was visiting these people back. This was back around '77, and they reported what they thought might have been Bigfoot and all these ghostly things happening in this cabin in the woods that they lived in. And I was down there one evening, and I remember this lady saying that she was seeing like a gypsy woman's head in the middle of the table. And so I said, "Well, if we go out here in this open field at about 11:10, there'll be a UFO waiting." Now, I was testing myself because she told me I was doing psychometry with her, and I was pretty accurate. So anyway, I went out there with a brother and a sister, both adults, and we get out into the open field, and there's a shaft of light coming up from behind the trees, going up toward the sky, and that would stop, and then it would go a little further, and then stop, and it would kind of pulsating, and then eventually touch the clouds overhead. And then it started to retract and come down, stop, and just kind of jerky, and then disappear
Wow.
behind the tree. And it did this more than once, and one time it appeared in a different direction and did it. And then it started raining and didn't see it again. Um, so I don't know what it was. In the Navy, I saw St. Elmo's fire back when I was on forward lookout over the bridge with my headphones on to say if I, see anything. And I'm there with my binoculars, and all of a sudden there's a strange buzzing sound, and there's a blue flame coming off this pole in front of me. There's a little screw or something coming off the side.
Okay.
And I thought, wait a minute. So I hold my hand out like this, and my fingers apart, and I got blue flames coming off my fingertips. And I knew then this is what a bird called St. Elmo's fire. And then it started raining. As soon as it did, it just sort of got less and less, and eventually it disappeared. And then it was time, off shift change. It's around midnight, and I go down to the mess decks, the kitchen, and that's where everybody gathers, to have a little snack before going to retiring for the night. And I'm telling everybody, because everybody knows Brent Raines is into UFOs, and I tell them what they saw. Yeah, sure. Yeah, right. And I'm there. No, 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 no. This isn't one of those spooky things. This is really a natural phenomenon. They thought I was trying to trick them or something, I guess. But anyway. So I don't know what I saw, but if it was a natural phenomenon of some kind, statical, St. Elmo's fire type thing, it just happened at the very time, in where I said we would be able to go into that open field and see it, you know. So maybe like the fireball thing, maybe it was just a fireball after all, but I picked up on it, you know. It seemed like. Anyway, those are kind of interesting, whatever they mean. But I don't know. I don't know if you had any idea what we were going to talk about tonight. I should have maybe presented more more specific cases, but anyway.
Well, actually, this is what I missed out when we were talking the first time was getting all of the experiences and getting the history and just learning more about you. Because when we were in Arkansas, you had a book out. And that's what, when Holly approached me, that's what she was like, well, we want to talk, to talk about the book, to promote the book. And I was just like, I've never done a show like this before, but we'll sure try it, you know. And you were so fantastic that, you went with me on that journey, and it was, oh my goodness. But that was what I wanted to do tonight, was to have the chance to hear you share you, and even though nothing is working appropriately for me tonight, it's probably a little bit more of that high strangeness, which annoys me beyond sometimes. But it's really cool to be able to just hear you and to understand some more about your background and what kind of things you do. I was really lucky. I could call Stan Friedman my friend. I don't know why he liked me. He liked me. And the first time I ever talked to him, I had left a message for him, and he called me back, and I answered on my watch back in the day when nobody did that. But, and I was chagrined because I had to call him back. And when I got him back, I was just like, this is why I had to call you back. I was Dick Tracying you. And you knew him. What is this Dick Tracying you're speaking of? It's like, my watch. I'm on my watch. I was on my watch. I had to call you back on a real phone. And, and then from that point on, he was my friend because I was embarrassed. He got over it. I got over it. He thought it was funny. But, when you get a chance to talk to people that have been in this field for a long time, like you, it's such a gift because there's a lot of people that are newcomers that don't really necessarily know all of the background. And I think it's really important. And I don't know why the both times that we have interviewed, there have been glitches, some of them pretty strong the first time. But I think it's because sometimes spirit, and I have spirits, but sometimes spirits are interested too. And sometimes I find that if it's a really interesting conversation, either ghosts or ETs or just general mayhem at my house, sometimes it's just they get involved too. So, and that's happened.
I know that we used to do the ghost box, a radio,
Yes.
a radio from Radio Shack, and fix it where it goes on continuous scan. And supposedly the voices will speak to the white noise periodically. And I did an interview. Oh, should I say it was Rich Hoffman? Okay, I did. Anyway, I did an interview with a telephone with Rich. And see, at the time I'd been introduced to him years earlier in the 70s up in Ohio, where he lived in Dayton, Ohio, back then. And Charles Wilhelm introduced me to him as Richard Hoffman. But after the interview, people noticed the unusual static and thought, gee, it's almost like a spirit contact thing, like ghost box. My daughter, she said that. She said, let's set it up and do a ghost box and see what we get. I said, no, I got to go to work in the morning. It's getting late. But she talked me into it. I got the thing out. I got the speaker set up and stereo speaker and got my recorder, a little miniature recorder, and we did it. And we went on a few minutes, and I said, okay, can anybody say Richard Hoffman? And this voice said, Rich Hoffman. And so I
Yes.
played it for him, and he says, interesting. He says, but he'd been involved in some kind of ghost activity years ago with a group. He said, but it sounds like you're actually talking to someone. And so I explained about, the EVP process that we were trying to do. And then we did it again, my daughter and I, and it happened again. But what made this special, though, was that I had always known him as Richard Hoffman.
Yeah.
And I said, Richard, what happened here, though, that your full name didn't come out all the way. It just said Rich Hoffman. And he said, well, Charlie Wilhelm introduced you to, always introduced me as Richard, but really all my friends and everybody just call me Rich. I said,
Yeah.
oh. So then I did it again with my daughter, and I remember on the audio, she said, oh, that gives me chill bumps.
Yeah.
So for a while, it seemed like I would be with some other people, and I would stop, and I'd say, oh, by the way, let me try something. And we would be off in Alabama or over here in East Tennessee, going to East Pulaski or someplace, or Fayetteville, that was it, visiting other people on investigation. And it seemed like it would happen again, Rich Hoffman, And but eventually he got tired of doing that little trick with me. But yeah,
I had him on 2 weeks ago.
yeah,
Rich. Yeah.
yeah. I don't know that he really likes me to talk about that story that much, but anyway, it happened. I played it years ago after that happened when he was still in
That's
youth
cool,
line.
though.
And they were, this guy played it over a loudspeaker, and everybody in the audience could hear it. And someone said, "We can do that for you, Rich." And I don't think he really wants to stick with the UFO like he is now. And
Yeah.
but yeah, that happened. Some people might say it was pareidolia, but yeah, it was. It impressed me, and I felt like I had developed a pretty good ear for picking these things out. But sometimes I'm told, no, it's pareidolia. But I've had a sensory neuroscientist listen to him, and he says, that's not pareidolia, but you're actually picking up something. Some people
That's not pareidolia. That is so not pareidolia. And it's really funny because he is who got me involved with the Scientific Coalition on UAP Studies.
Mhm.
And in fact, they've just had the conference, but it is so amazing that that's whose name you said, because that was a kismet thing too.
Yeah, I thought it was real interesting that, I thought it just hadn't come out in the audio, and lo and behold, Rich was what it should say. I was the wrong one, but then afterwards, it seemed like when I did it in follow-ups that it would start saying Richard Hoffman. I thought, what's going on here? Anyway,
Yeah.
the strange
Yeah.
things in the other
Oh,
world.
well, we are about out of time, and will you tell our listeners where they can find you right quick?
Yes. You can email me at Brent Raines, BRENTRAYNES. I see you got RAINES, but it's RAYNES. Sorry, people. I spell it different. But as one word, at yahoo.com. And also, I have a site where I post each month's online magazine, Alternate Perceptions, at www.apmagazine.info. apmagazine.info. Comes out the first of each month. And we got the July issue out right now, and it's got an old interview I did back in 2018 with Steve Ward and the late Rosemary Ellen Guiley on a lot of things about John Keel, the Mothman, the Men in Black, and so on.
Three major glitches on my computer while we've been doing this. So I was like, I
Yeah,
don't recognize that music.
I thought maybe it was time for the show to end, and this was the signing off. Oh, man.
Well, I have enjoyed you so much. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for inviting me again. This is our fourth time. Third time I thought was a charm, but anyway, thank you for the invitation.
We'll do it a third time. If you'll come
Uh,
back, I would certainly love to have you. I enjoy you.
oh no, we've already had the third time. This is the fourth time.
This is the second time.
Well, we did the one time in Arkansas, and then we did it soon afterwards, and then we did it a third time, and this is the fourth time. Surprise! That's what I remember.
It has just been one of those days. I apologize, but
maybe one or two of those interviews were forgettable. I'm sorry.
I'm trying to save that first one. Maybe I just tried to make that first one hide. So, but I just love that you come back. I really do. You're so awesome. So,
well, thank you very much. I got to remember to say that that check. So for saying all those nice things. But anyway. By the way, I got a friend up in Maine, Nomar Slavic, and he's going to start writing articles for Fate magazine. He's got a number of cool books out.
Wonderful.
And he would probably make a great guest sometime.
I will reach out to get his contact information from you.
Alrighty. He's got a lot of cool stories, and he's just sent 2 articles into Fate magazine, and he let me have a look at them. They're pretty cool, awesome. I'll mention one of them where I helped investigate the Francis Swan case in LA, Maine. The lady who was a contactee who back then the CIA invited to Washington D.C. and supposedly I got that wrong. She wasn't invited that I know of actually there was a military guy who started writing messages when he visited her, automatic writing from a space being called Alpha, and was told supposedly that there was a UFO outside and that they went to the windows, they'd see it. Supposedly they did. And supposedly there was something that happened with radar that was peculiar in the area. But I interviewed her, and some of her family was there, her husband and daughter and granddaughter, when I visited a couple of times, and I met this guy from the Navy who brought her the attention of other people, because he really thought she was sincere and interesting, and that the government needed to look into her story, investigate. So he was responsible for shedding light on her experiences. So anyway,
I want to talk to you about this when we go off, but we've got to be done in like 30 seconds.
All right.
So everybody listening, you'll have to catch me when I talk to her so that you can find out more about this story. And we will see y'all next week. Same cat time, same cat channel, better audio. So y'all have a